You're
Well,
coming in.
you're already charging then if you had three shows.
So what's been happening, man? Let me tag you on this post. I'll tag you on the show, so it'll show up on your. All right, let's see here. Let's see if it's even on yet. Is it on yet? Yeah, there we go. Okay, it's coming on now.
Are we live already?
Yes, we're live, but nobody's here yet. Nobody's made it in yet. They'll take about another minute.
Right.
Right on.
Do you usually get a lot of people right at the beginning?
No, they usually take about 10 minutes because typically our notifications they've been suppressed, and so
Yeah.
we'll get like last we just did a show, so like in the first 10 minutes there might have been 60 people, then it went up like 120 people within like 15 minutes.
Yeah, I did 4 2-hour sessions a few days ago,
Wow.
and I find that people often complain about words as a form of communication and say that it's very limited. But that's not my personal experience. My experience is that when you share it, words carry energy,
Mm-hmm.
and they create space also because they take our attention. And if we can accept the challenge in life, which is to be empty, then our attention is open to the words and open to the meaning behind the words. But even beyond the meaning is pure energy. We are energy. So when we speak, we share that energy with others. And now we're using this wonderful technology that carries our words around the world. We can actually experience oneness if we're coming from that space. Of course, if we're not coming from the space of oneness, then, well, for instance, I had a big experience for about nearly a year when I tried to get a community happening in Australia, and every time we met, there was always so many varying different opinions. And also, people, because owning land together is kind of like a marriage, people are very worried about that piece of land, what the future of it's going to be. And I can remember that one person in the group asked the question, well, what happens if so and so's grandson rides a trail bike on the property and creates all this noise? And I mean, it's ridiculous. People just um, people are in a constant state of defense, and uh,
It's
so we're moving into a time, or we're moving into a consciousness now where that's no longer the case.
Yeah. I had some friends drop in last night and visit and spent the night, and they have the same aspirations, and a lot of people do. A lot of people have attempted to and are attempting to build communities that are communities of equality and so on that carry the characteristics of what we're all coming into, this oneness. And I've talked to a lot of people over the years. I've had people come on the show and talk about it. And it's interesting what you're talking about because the same the conditioning maybe we haven't, maybe we're just getting there now, but the effects of our conditioning still come into play when, at least what I've seen and what I've been privy to, where it's still the, let's just say, the concept of possession and righteousness. What you can do, what you can't do. I don't know how that's all going to work. I know we're all headed that way, but to me, a soul is free. And a soul, I mean, freedom, sovereignty, whatever you want to call it, is part of oneness. Not encroaching on you, you're not encroaching on me. But how does that look? I mean, how did it go for you when you said, was this recently that you tried to make this happen?
No, it was a number of years ago, probably 20 years ago. In
Oh,
fact, it was a period. I mean, I live in an area where there's basically it was populated it was settled by the hippies. They
Uh-huh.
always choose the best part of the world to settle in, and of course, what happens is they buy a piece of land for practically nothing. In this case, the local area was supporting a banana and cattle industry, and basically the market collapsed, and they could buy 100 acres of land for $5,000, and so the moment they bought the land, they started to build illegal dwellings all over the land, and eventually the local state government, they couldn't afford to have a huge kind of furor, a protest by bulldozing people's properties and houses. So they actually had to make it lawful. They had to make it lawful, and they created a kind of a way for people to share land, and that's where all this started.
Wow.
Um, but maybe what I wanted to start by saying is that actually I wrote about this week, um, but it's really important to understand consciousness and how it works within this third dimensional reality, and how it works for us as an individual. So basically, everything is composed of energy, which is also light, and light comes into our iris, and the image gets inverted, and then it hits our retina, so it registers on the retina, and then it passes that signal back to an area of the brain, and the brain works on probability. So, of course, probability implies that one thing is based on another thing. In this case, the brain is processing its reality based on the past, based on it or on what it expects to see or expects to experience. So really, there's a profound kind of mystery in this, because what that means is that what an individual sees is what it expects to see.
Mm-hmm.
And also, even more amazing, as a collective consciousness of humanity, we create the external culture, civilization, everything that's outside of us is a projection. So, so basically, we're looking at the world through a particular lens that we choose. And the problem with having a lens is that if you see it as a telescope, um, if we're using that lens to point at something, it excludes everything else.
Mm.
So we get a very limited vision of what's actually happening. And in the case of humanity as a whole, what we're seeing is an illusion. It's a real illusion. It's a real game. So it has substance and it has reality, but it's only part of the picture. So if I may, I'll just go back to the last interview you gave me. And by the way, thanks very much for inviting me again.
Thank you for
Um,
coming.
but yeah, the simple formula is consciousness is observing and is always one with form and formlessness. And when all of that gels together, then we are unity consciousness, which is boundless love. And so boundless love is like the gift of being human and divine at the same time. And I just want to, I have this beautiful quote from Nasagurata, who was an Indian guru, but he was really a wonderful teacher of the 20th century. And he said, wisdom is wisdom is knowing that I am nothing. Love is knowing that I'm everything. And between the two, my life moves.
Yeah, I like
And
that. I like that quote.
yeah, it's a great quote, isn't it? So we are the. I mean, I've also talked about my story. This is a story, of or myth. I've talked about my 13 time travelers that I'm a part of and that I am kind of the earthly spokesperson for. And so basically, by doing that, I've already narrowed the lens because since we're one with everything and since we're multi-located potentially, as soon as you create any concept of relationship, even with light beings or beings of very high dimension, then you've created an idea of separation. You could say the same thing about God. We imagine God to be real, but at the same time, it implies separation. Um, so it's really important that we understand that we play this myth, we play this game, but we're both form and formlessness. So, what is formlessness? Formless is that which we experience in a deep meditation when we have no thoughts. And formlessness is also, there's no experience in that place. You've actually become that. So, you are both this and that at the same time. But of course, when you come out of meditation of that depth, um, you carry with you what I've called childlike wonderment, a sense of presence. And you notice everything in an entirely different way. You're looking through a different lens. And, you know, maybe you walk along the street and you see a crack in the concrete and there's a flower growing out of it. And you think to yourself, wow, that's amazing. And it just takes all of your attention. And but at the same time, also, I like to say that, well, this is my personal experience that, you know, I have this wall behind me, but when I look at a wall, in fact, when I look anywhere, but particularly the wall or a blue sky, I can see little flashing points of light everywhere.
Mm.
So I'm actually seeing energy, I'm seeing the greater reality, but it's kind of mixed with the physical reality. And it's the beauty,
Mm.
I call it the beauty contrast. So, for instance, when you're driving along the road and you've got, uh, you know, trees between you and the sun, it creates this beautiful dappled effect on the road, you know, light and shadow, light and shadow. And, you know, I used to think, well, you know, it's all about unity, but it's also about contrast.
Mm.
Contrast in a painting between colors or contrast in the notes of a musical piece is what makes that beautiful. So, so we live in the possibility of contrast.
Hmm. Yeah. Like this whole trip is about that, right? I mean, like it's the broader our contrast, the broader our palette to paint from, right? I mean, it's, and then a lot, and I love what you're getting into here because so much of this seems to have kind of converged to one place for people, which is okay, I'm awake now. I understand things aren't what they seem. And I start digging into myself and like, you know, what you're talking about, deep meditations and so on. And where lucid dreaming is becoming, seems to be becoming more prominent with people. And then you say, the world needs to change. You know, this needs to be a better place. These atrocities or this or that need to go away. So, in terms of like what you're talking about, how, okay, so if the form is the experience and the formless is what? No, really, no thought. But I mean, when we talk about quantum mechanics, quantum reality, uh, our thoughts are creating what's happening. How do you, how does somebody, because I know you've written about this because I remember seeing something on it last time we talked, and I want to ask you about another subject that you write a lot about, but how do we effectively change the world? Or like, let's just take your example from 20 years ago. If you were going to go back in and make the community that you intended to 20 years ago, what would you do different? Knowing what you know
Hmm.
now versus what you didn't know then. Right?
Well, thanks for the question. This brings up the whole subject of having an agenda to do something or change something or create something. And look, I certainly don't. I certainly respect people's desire to create a better world, but the question is, how do you go about doing that? And from my perspective, it means dropping any idea of what's needed
Mm.
and becoming one with consciousness. And when you become one with consciousness, love, as I say, is automatic. It's just flowing out of you. And for example, I have a dream about an interconnected um, pattern of communities around the world that would be linked by the internet and also uh, by special meetings at the community on the pieces of land. So what's necessary is that we need to set up. If we have that agenda, we need to set up a means to achieve what we want. But within that organization, the most important thing is love. And in order to be love, we have to let go of the future, including our plans. And it's kind of difficult to grasp because when I've written, I don't normally get any negative feedback, but sometimes I get comments, particularly from men, which is interesting. Is look, it's all very well to write all this stuff, and it all sounds wonderful, but how will it actually change the world? And it's a good question, but uh, but the mystery is that the moment you become consciousness, you change the world forever. It might only take 1 or 5 or 10 or 100 or 144,000 is the popular idea to uh, to create that energy, uh, to create that kind of uh, chemistry in people's minds where you're magnetized together and operating as co-creators as one. Um, so it all comes back to that, like uh, how are you going to attract the energy that you need? Of course, there's monetary energy, but also there's just inspiration. And the only way to do that successfully is to become attractive, like a moth to a candle flame. Except but it's kind of true actually because the ego died. Um, so yeah, this is the challenge: is daring to be empty.
Well, the thing you say about the childlike wonder, which I've felt this for years. I mentioned it many times on the show, uh, and then the fascination with everything in front of you, like examination of everything in front of you. And I had a couple of experiences. I talked about it in the last couple of weeks. It was 2 days in a row where I had like a 3 or 4 hour period where that's what was happening. I could only describe it as very lucid dream-esque, very much like a lucid dream, and where I was seeing everything, like when you might, if you ever have, taken mushrooms, and everything is alive, and you see everything, just like you talk about with the walls and seeing the orbs or the lights. But it wasn't just, and it makes sense with what you're saying. That's why I'm bringing it up because I don't know how to describe it, but to say that when I'm what I was receiving was that when you're present with everything in front of you and around you, you're present with everything there is, period. And I guess one way to put it would be like the universe knows what you want. So you don't have to think about it. You just relish in everything around you. And it was really the main thing that I got out of it, this 2 episodes, was when I'm present with everything that's in my, let's say, five sensory area, I'm actually more present with everything. And there was even a point where I was in this state, sitting right here in this chair, and I could feel Morgan sitting right next to me. Like it wasn't a human description or guidance. It was something else telling me that door, so to speak, that portal or whatever is right there next to you. And the way you access it is by basically, to use your words, in greater in the context that the human normally uses, is to love everything around you, you know. And as this has been happening, other things happen, you know, other things that we call synchronicities or serendipity, they happen. And you can see how they kind of like just fall in line. And you're right, it's not a logical, rational, step by step thing. It's like a letting go thing that doesn't make any sense, but it brings everything into your field. Something like that. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, good point again. I don't want to be critical or make judgments because actually I don't. In my essence, I don't have any judgment about anything. Everyone is choosing what they want to choose, and that's the reality in the physical. And everyone has a right to go by their own intuition or their own wisdom. However, having said that, I spend quite a lot of time on Facebook because I found it a wonderful tool to
Mm-hmm.
do what we're doing. It's kind of like our online community. And one aspect of that online community that kind of frustrates me is that people have such a kind of complex view of spirituality. Uh, Even, for instance, the idea of dimensions is, it becomes, oh, I'm in the third dimension. Then there's the fifth dimension, which contains all of these star races, and then there are higher dimensions where there are light beings that barely have a body, and there are aliens that drive spacecraft that are intelligent, and all of that sort of stuff. There are 144,000 people, that are going to ascend or lead the other people. Um, there are ascended masters and angels, and I could just go on forever. I call it the spiritual supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, in the end, that's just another um, emanation of having a strong agenda or a strong idea of how you want to achieve what you want in life. And the thing is, the mind, its quality is that it always seeks greater happiness. So even within the spiritual realm, in a way, within the spiritual community, people are seeking greater happiness. Um, but also if there's a split between people, which there isn't, the people out there who aren't, say, on Facebook, like nearly most of humanity, they are pursuing their dream too, albeit a physical dream normally, money, power, politics, sex, all of those things. So uh, basically, it's wonderful that you had that experience because you are experiencing oneness. You are able to you're starting to feel those superpowers or those gifts, um, and you're starting to sense people around you. Like Morgan's in the room, you can feel her there without even looking at her, and this is the direction we're going in. It's going to be wonderful because um, I think last week I talked about atmosphere, which was one of the buildings that I suggested could be part of a multi-dimensional community, and within that atmosphere. Did I talk about it last time or not? Can
No,
you
I
remember?
don't. Yeah, I remember you didn't. Atmosphere? No. Mm-mm.
Okay. So I'll give a very brief description. Okay. So try and visualize this because it becomes extra clear when you visualize it as I'm talking. But imagine a sphere, okay, on a piece of land. It's 6.66 meters wide, or we call it circumference. No, not circumference. Anyway, it's across, okay? And so imagine that's the equator. So I'm holding up my hands, and imagine my glasses are the floor of this sphere, okay,
Mm-hmm.
right in the middle. And so you walk in through one of four doors, which are aspected perfectly to north, south, east, and west, okay? And actually, one thing you might do is you might see them as elemental. You could see them as earth, air, fire, and water,
Mm-hmm.
and you could choose the element that you think would be most resonant with the particular meeting you're about to have. Okay. So when the meeting starts, you walk in through one of these four doorways, and obviously there's a place to walk on the inside of the wall. It's about a meter wide. In fact, I'm going to talk about concentric circles that are a meter wide. Okay, so when you walk in, there's a desk. It's round, but it's not a round table. It's a strip of desk going around the room. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and you have 12. Probably guess where I'm going with this. You
Mm-hmm.
have 12 swiveling chairs. Okay, and you sit in the chair, and if someone talks across the circle, the beauty of it is you can turn your chair and you can look directly into their eyes. Uh, and also, if the person next to you is talking, you can turn around and look into their eyes. And so again, it's all about connection. And however, if you need to turn away for some reason, or to leave the meeting for a moment, which I'm about to do, I need a glass of water.
Mm-hmm.
Then you turn around. And also, the interesting thing is that you could also turn around if you don't feel resonant or you feel irritated by someone in the circle who's talking. You could turn around to the wall, and this gives it this dynamic, of let's get real, And so, so imagine there were six men and six women sitting on these revolving stools, and imagine there was a short ceremony, and one of the women got up and she walked to a flap in the desk, which she lifted up, and she walked through, and the floor, which I mentioned before, I didn't actually say what the floor is, but the floor is a half an inch thick plate glass. And beneath the floor is water, preferably pumped from the property where the community is. And in the water are crystals and coloured rocks. And they are lit by beautiful lighting. So they shine in the water. And at the same time, at the top of the, it'll be a dome, at the top of the sphere, which is like a hemisphere, there'll be a nice round, fairly large skylight. So that's letting in beautiful fresh light. Okay. So anyway, she walks across the floor, the plate glass, and at the middle of the floor is a metal grate. And the metal grate has 12 spokes coming up, right? And right in the middle, there's another little sphere. Uh, and so we've come from the big sphere, smaller, 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 and then we've got a little sphere and a grate that's 1 meter wide. And so she could have brought any object for the ceremony. It could be a talking stick, not that it's necessary, but she could bring any gift to put into the water. But likely she might, for instance, bring a coloured rock or a crystal, and she dropped that it's a grate, so she can drop it through. And now this is Atlantean technology that I have remembered,
Wow.
and this is the way that they made decisions. And I want you to just let go of the idea that there was the fall of Atlantis.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what happened. Around about 13,000 years ago, was the beginning of an ice age, and around about what would have been the middle of the ice age, there was a comet that was 10 miles wide, and it broke up a bit like the comet Levi that crashed into Jupiter. The pieces were then 1 kilometer wide, and they crashed into the ice cap and melted all of the ice, which meant there was a sea level rise of 178 feet, which doesn't sound a lot, but it was enough of a sea rise to instantaneously kill most of humanity. And then there was the condition, of course, of the atmosphere, because this is an enormous explosion. Everything would have been like a greenhouse effect and dark. And except it wouldn't have warmed the planet, it would have made it freezing cold. So the people that were most clever on the planet were the Atlantean elders, and they were able to get through this period. And they actually settled. They settled in different places, but the first place they settled was called Ubekli Tepe in Turkey. And they built well, we don't really know what it was. It's kind of mysterious, but because it was 50 times as big as Stonehenge. And the Neolithic stones were kind of, rather than like Stonehenge with a top on them, they were just a T shape. Okay. I mean, this whole story raises a few questions, like because for starters, there had to be a body of Neolithic tribespeople who had been like gypsies, if you like, all over the world, living a tribal life. All of a sudden, they settled. They had to settle to build this building under the supervision of the Atlantean elders. And so what happened was, it was the first birth of agriculture. So they kind of tamed the wild grains, and they altered their genetics a bit, and they planted crops, so they were able to live in one place. And the other thing is that in the story, of course, I mentioned this great catastrophe, which did happen then. But a lot of people are expecting, or they have this kind of inner fear. You see, we all have terror and rage, which I talked about last time, which occurred when oneness split into two-ness, or the first relationship was possible, which was the mother and father of creation and their love affair. And the fact that I could tell a whole story about this, but I'm not going to. But basically, they became lovers, and he had pushed her into the void and then rescued her. So he had experienced rage, and she had experienced terror. And so basically, humanity has this. It's like passed down. It's part of the hand-me-down self. It's come through an infinite number of generations from the beginning to a spirit world, even beyond the physical world. And we carry this terror and rage, and the only place it can be resolved is here, within our families and within our communities and within the greater civilization. So we're kind of the frontier of consciousness, but because we feel this fear, we have what I call catastrophobia, a phobia of catastrophes, and people are kind of subliminal, which is kind of here again, and it's kind of like the atmosphere in a way. We are an atmosphere, but below the subliminal contains this fear and this projection of what might happen. So I hope I answered your question.
No, that was in depth. There's a lot we could unpack from there, but it leads me into another thing that you write a lot about, And that's what people call it: divine union, sacred union. I mean, I read your words and I understand that it's far. You were talking about words at the beginning. I don't know. I'd love for you to expand on this a little bit. We still got 23 minutes. I would love for you to talk about it. And I just want you to know that, like, in reading your stuff, that I've picked up on the last couple of since we talked, I see it as a frequency, right? I see it as an energy form. You could call it a template. You could call it I don't know what you're going to call it. You could have, say, Christ consciousness is over here, and let's say masculine's over here, and the goddess is over here. But this that you write about, I think what I'm trying to say, or what maybe you could expound on, is that it's more than these words. It is the energy behind these words, and it is an energy in itself. What are your thoughts on I mean, what can you add to that? What are your thoughts on? Seems to be a lot of coupling taking place, opposite sex, same sex. I mean, there seems to be let's say a new flavor or higher level of alignment with relationships, a new type of relationships. A lot of the codependent frequencies are being acknowledged and put in the proper place. And, I mean, you write about it. I shouldn't be trying to describe it. Can you fill us in on what your thoughts are of this frequency we call sacred union, divine union?
I was really hoping you'd ask this question. Yeah, I thought you were going to ask about time traveling, but I'd much rather talk about. I mean, I just accept that that is part of my myth and that it exists, the time traveling. But this desire for relationship is like the most prevalent longing, deep longing, and it goes with a sense of abandonment and disappointment. And, personally, I've got three children to two different mothers. They're all grown up now, but I'm still friends with the mothers. And but nevertheless, in this particular lifetime, on a physical level, the thing that I never really had was a deeply um, mutual love affair with a woman. And recently, I've been living alone, and I'm about to go to Europe um, in July, and I'm hoping to come to the States, so we might meet,
Hmm.
perhaps if that. Um, and I'm basically getting on the road, and I'm so much looking forward to it. I'm so excited, but also I'm meeting my love, my girlfriend, who's actually Nigerian, um, and she's 29. And I don't have any, see, I don't have any, you might think, oh God, a 72-year-old guy with a 29-year-old woman, that's just disgusting, or, that would never work. But I don't have any concept again of how we will relate. I just know that we're going to be working together and traveling the world together. I certainly wouldn't insist on any kind of intimate relationship with her, but I feel that probably will happen, because we've been talking for 3 years on the internet. We've had many Zoom calls, and we know each other pretty well. So, we know what to expect with each other. So, anyway, what I wanted to jump into is something profound that I experienced in 1996. In 1996, I split up with the mother of my two younger children. And because we weren't really in love, within a week, that she had a man that was kind of hanging around, and he actually came to my daughter's second birthday. And meanwhile, I'd gone to a party. I kind of knew these people. I'd gone to a party up in this incredible community, built on a cliff above a rainforest creek. Just amazing. It was built by sannyasins, of followers of Osho. And anyway, I'd met this woman. Her name was Zeno. And after a 3-month love affair, which was amazing, we agreed to meet in India. in about 3 or 4 months' time after that. And she actually went to the States and had a relationship. And I also had a kind of like a meeting with someone during that 4 months. And so when we met in India, she had fallen for this guy a little bit. So um, it was kind of a little awkward at first. And when you have a course or a retreat in Osho's ashram, which is in Pune, not far from Bombay, you have an interview with a course facilitator, and she determines in a way, she has a chat with you just to find out whether you're really committed to the process, and so she sorts people out basically
Hmm.
in a loving way, just for their benefit. And so Zeno, said, "Oh, look, I've had this other relationship. I don't know. Should we be friends, intimate friends, or what should?" And the woman said, she said, "Well, actually, to be intimate friends is very desirable, because when you're an intimate friend, um, you don't have that expectation, you don't have that baggage of your previous intimate relationship. You're not carrying any baggage." So yeah, so let me describe it to you. So in the middle of the ashram was a black pyramid. It was glass black pyramid, so you couldn't see through. And in the basement of the pyramid, kind of the pyramid was sitting on a square room. There was a beautiful carpeted room with cushions, and the facilitator was sitting up the front to begin with, and there was a picture of Osho, the teacher, naked to the waist, and had beautiful mala flowers around him. And the whole place was just very sensual,
Hmm.
And anyway, the only time we don't get the wrong thought about this, because the only time we were um, together naked was when we had a short ceremony, and I think there were 14 couples, so there's 28 people sitting around in a circle naked, and the teacher says to us, sorry, the facilitator woman says to us, "I'm going to," and she walked into the room and she placed a whole pile of cloth, it looked like cloth, onto the floor, all the same color. And so she said, invited us to go and investigate. So each couple got up and we kind of pulled out something separate. And it turned out to be a very large cloak, and it only had 2 armholes in it.
Hmm.
So we knew immediately that each couple was to wear one of these cloaks, and each couple would have one arm out to do things with. And so the facilitator said, "Now you're going to spend 3 days and 3 nights in this cloak together." And you see, Western people in our relationships, even though we talk about unconditionality, we're not really unconditional. And when we don't feel like being there, we withdraw. We'll take space, of course, as the expression. We'll take some space. And the whole point of this particular exercise was to show you that you don't really need to take space. So I don't know whether you'll guess, but uh, to give you a couple of examples, or 3 examples, when one of us wanted to go to the toilet, you would actually go to the toilet with them, and you would keep the cloak on, if you can imagine that. And when you went to the shower, you would shower in adjoining showers, and obviously you couldn't keep the cloak on, but you would be invited to put your foot out or hold their hand, so you're always in contact. Okay, the same thing when you eat food. You ate food obviously sitting next to each other, but you would also remain in some form of contact. Okay,
Wow.
so This was quite early. This was in the first week and the first week of the process, which was 14 days, was mainly about um, how society looked at sexuality, how we react in intimate situations. And one thing that came up, which is interesting, is that at one point the facilitator said, well, all the girls can go to one end of the room and all the guys can come to the other end of the room and they can have a discussion. And you might guess what the theme, the main theme that evolved naturally amongst the women was sexual abuse in
Really?
their earlier life. Yeah.
Wow.
And the main thing that the guys were concerned about was that in the process, which I'm about to describe, there was no need for erection for the men. And they felt disempowered by this idea that they wouldn't have that wand. They wouldn't be able to show their manhood, you know. So anyway, I'm going to jump on to the second week. So in the second week, we had the actual process, and it was kind of funny. We'd left the group when we left the group, which we still met every day. We would call it going to do our homework. And in Pune, there are wonderful lodgings with marble floors and flat roofs, and you get the ashram provides employment for a lot of women, and so they come in and they do all of your cooking and ironing, and basically your total focus is on your partner. And so when we actually started our homework, we would stand maybe about 4 meters from each other. We take our clothes off to begin with. And in this process, it's really important to understand that we were always focusing on our breath and having eye contact with
Mm.
the other, with our partner. Um, I didn't actually use the sound meditation, which I use all the time now, but that would be equally good, sound or breath. Probably it's best if the couple uses the same method of tuning to their inner energy. And so we have the next thing we did was we had a clearing. Now, I didn't tell the complete story. I only told her a little bit of it about the original father and mother. But the issue they had was that they didn't clear their emotions before making love.
Mm.
It's very important to bring everything up to the surface because that's where the real healing occurs. In some ways, that's the feminine side of consciousness. The masculine side is more about thinking. So the masculine side, the mind, requires stillness in meditation, but the feminine side requires movement for the emotions.
Mm.
Okay, so so basically, we would you say to your partner, "Is there anything that you have felt or wanted to say in the last week or two that you haven't felt comfortable to address to me?" And then you would shut up and you would listen, preferably empty again. And you would, the only thing you would say when she finished talking was, "Thank you."
Right.
And then you would say again, "Is there anything else you would like to say?" And then you would say, "Thank you." And then it turned around the other way, and she would offer you that chance to clear. So, having done the clearing, we're very intimate then, and we would get on the bed that we were going to be on, and we had a nice little ceremony. Then we would actually just pranam to the god and goddess, each other,
Mm.
and then we would go into. So this is where it becomes very. I mean, in a way, this is where everything was leading to. Um, you would have coconut oil. Coconut oil just happens to be organic coconut oil that happens to be the most useful thing for intimacy because it's completely 100% safe when used internally or externally. So this is where the men, of course, had expressed their concern, but the woman would take the coconut oil and insert the man's penis into her vagina, and um, and then we would stop and we would look into each other's eyes. There are a couple of different ways, positions that are really useful for this process, because it means you can, because we're going to go for 2 hours and you need a pretty comfortable way to be together for 2 hours with the, and the invitation is uh, primarily to be in eye contact and meditation, but also to while one's looking into one's partner's eyes, you remain still. And actually, we did do a little process which I didn't mention beforehand, because it's what's called being in a state of allowance, which is also called latihan, which is a term used by Ubud, which is a sect in Indonesia. But anyway, the important thing about being in a state of allowance is that you only move when you feel impelled to move. So most of the time you're still, probably. And a second important thing is you only talk about the present, about what you're feeling and sensing in the present moment. You don't even talk about an intimate experience you had a few days ago, or anything else for that matter, that's not in the moment. And so, what did I experience? What was the point of all of this, or what was the outcome of all of this? And the outcome was that I saw on her face all the archetypes of woman: maiden, a lover, wife, witch, whore, crone, and so on. It's kind of like going through the age, and and so that was amazing. I actually saw this. I just saw this on her face, and I felt it coming from her. And then I experienced something perhaps even more profound. I started to see and experience a connection with her other lifetimes. Not
Mm.
actually all, but at least two or three of them. And so it was an amazing experience, one that I'll never forget. One that I would love to actually, uh, if I have an agenda to teach or to facilitate sacred sexuality, I would love to do these retreats.
Yeah, that's it's some of the stuff you're saying, and we didn't follow a certain protocol. Although Morgan downloaded, and for many years downloaded stuff regarding sacred sexuality, Helios Gamos, divine union. But I have to say, I've seen several different parts of her, such as these archetypes you're describing. I've seen her morph into different aspects of a goddess, dragon, and so this subject, uh, this part of our reality that's gone forgotten, carries a lot of powerful magic. I mean, several of our encounters that were very long. One in particular I remember was like about 4 hours, and it was not. It wasn't the norm of what we're all thought sex was. But as a result of these encounters, for instance, the ceiling would disappear. We'd see ships going across. The walls would disappear. The floor would disappear. Visitations. I mean, so there's a whole, you know, just infinite abyss or infinite void of potential that comes from this type of thing that, oh yeah, she also morphed into a man one time. That's right. And I morphed into a woman. But yeah, so I mean, this is just, I don't want to say it's a tip of the iceberg because I think it's very important, especially when you look at oneness and you actually have physical mirrors of yourself essentially, and you can actually create what I guess theoretically is the divine union within yourself, and then you bring in the sacred sexuality. It's not just, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I really am glad that you went over this today because it 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 does some affirming for me, although I really didn't doubt it. But the fact that somebody's actually can talk about it in this type of protocol, and the things that I can attest to, and she can attest to, the things that it opens up, like the information, the site that it opens up, it's quite extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And to be able to, for instance, let's say in that 4 hour episode, to be able to be in a position at 50 plus years old and in, let's just say, a missionary position without moving, like you were talking about, with no movement whatsoever, the sensations a million fold beyond anything I'd experienced at my highest level of traditional physical intimacy, which was very thorough and very, broad. So this is powerful stuff, and I think if anyone does any research into it, you can look at the Egyptians, you can look at the women that were carrying this hierogamic type of frequency that would actually serve, and it wasn't just like as a traditional concubine. It was actually them sharing code, sharing in bringing a broader awareness to the king or the prince or whoever they were involved with. I mean, this was actually something that was a very big deal if you look into some of these civilizations prior to our time here. So that's fascinating. I watched the show on Netflix. I think it was Netflix, about Osho. I'd seen his quotes and I never really read anything, but through all the storyline and the narrative of how, what goes up must come down and all that, I did see through it, and I did see the power of the community and the things that they were doing. And really to have done that in that time period, I think was quite impressive. And to me, far from a cult. It was, that's just a stupid word, but really to do what they did, if you ever watched that, and anyone that hasn't seen it, it's quite extraordinary. And that was a big basis of it. It wasn't like free sex or, what I mean? It wasn't like that. It was actually a sacred thing that was a part of their day-to-day lifestyle.
Hmm.
It wasn't just like,
So it's interesting to bring this up because the woman that I did the sacred sexuality with was Zeno. I mentioned her. She was actually one of um, the leaders or in the piece of land, which I think was quite a large piece of land in Oregon. Osho called it the Muddy Ranch. Um, anyway, she was friends with Sheila, who was quite famous from that
Sheila was
event.
the
Yeah,
number one. Yeah.
and she was actually really good friends with her husband, and Sheila got jealous, and she sent her to the end of the community where all the gay boys were. This was in the time of AIDS, and no one knew what it was. And she spent 6 months there before she found out that Sheila had faked her test results and that she'd been unfairly
Yeah.
sent there. But anyway, right at the beginning of what you were saying there, you talked about the dragon, seeing the dragon
Mm-hmm.
in Morgan. The dragon's an interesting archetype because in England they have this wonderful, they have these wonderful crop circles, you probably know, which I'm very excited because I'm going to be I'm going to arrive in London on July the 1st. And one of the first things I'll do is I'll be going down to the village of Avebury, which has a wonderful stone circle around it. And it's also, there's a hill close by called Silbury Hill. And Silbury Hill is the center of the crop circle phenomenon. And when I was there in the village for a day, I was looking at the stones, but there were busloads of generally older tourists, very straight tourists coming into the village. And they had come to see the stone circles. But when I looked only a kilometre away over the fields, I could see people moving around the crop circle, and they're meditating and chanting and lying down, and the most extraordinary kind of eclectic bunch of people from all over the world is in this crop circle at the same time, you know. And I find it amusing that there were kind of two worlds or two civilizations like juxtaposed, but they actually weren't aware of each other. Or maybe that's, sorry, the older people weren't aware of it. Now let's go back to sexuality. So we've managed to avoid using the word tantra, but the word tantra actually means weaving, warping, or looming. So it involves the process of weaving cloth. But actually what it means is the weaving, warping, and looming of the left and right brain, which is our masculine on the left and feminine on the right, which of course crosses over here. And then our right-hand side is masculine, and our left-hand side, which has the heart in it, is the feminine side. Okay, even though the heart's just a physical organ, probably the real heart is what I call the upper heart, which I meditate with. So it's kind of here.
Right.
The issue with Tantra, though, that has come up mainly in the last 40 odd years since people have been traveling to India and stuff, is that Tantra has been abused. And basically people come together, or they practice various techniques to get greater satisfaction, achieve longer orgasms, or whatever it is that they want. So again, they brought the agenda into their connection. It's no longer a pure connection of what I call boundless or unconditional love. And so our whole society is always, even the world outside, people are always rushing to a conclusion, rushing to an objective, an outcome, success. And because they do that, again, they don't fully experience who they are. And of course, there's only one of us here. The original father and mother came from oneness. So there's only one of us here meeting. And you're an actor in my story, and I'm an actor in yours.
Right. So we'll have to continue this conversation and dive into it because I really feel like you've got a good perspective. Because this thing with the tantric. I mean, we could talk about this for an hour because you're right. There's distortion has seeped in everywhere. But what you're talking about, what I can relate to in my experience with Morgan, and what a few others that I've come across, we're talking about something that's much greater than physical, something that involves the light bodies, something that involves this weaving that you're talking about, be it tantra or not, and something that offers, let's just say, a portal, be it the woman's body universal or both together or however it works. But there's me and many others, and I think you're much more well versed in this. I mean, you're going back years here, but there is a whole, like we're like you said at the beginning. This is like the fingernail on the body. We're just in this little small piece, and one of the ways, evidently, I mean, from my own experience and what I've gathered over the years and doing this show and researching, whatever, talking to Morgan about her downloads, there's a whole gigantic, enormous portal available through the frequency that can be met in this type of collaboration that is centered on what there only is, love. I mean, it's and I love the way you explain it. So we'll have to do this again and go deeper into it if you want to.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, you mean
I
on a separate issue, on a separate occasion?
Yeah. That's what I mean. I thought you were asking. I thought you were going to bring some. Yeah, because I've got to do another show right now. I already sent her a note said it'd be 15 minutes late, so I don't want to
Okay.
keep her too late. But yeah, I'd love to do this and talk about your experience and just talk about this, because this is not something that you're going to find on these platforms that's being talked about. And if it is, it's going to be, in my opinion, like you were talking about what were you talking about, the tunnel vision? When you get it, the conversations that I've been privy to, like when I research online, has been, like let's say that it was from a certain perception, be it tantric or another discipline or philosophy or secret fraternal practice or procedure. So, be it sex magic, whatever. This is something that to me, and you described it pretty well, I think in like 35-minute mark, where the field is open. It is as open as you can get it, which means that you're way past authenticity, way past vulnerability, and you're in this transparency that starts to create, it's almost like going into a cosmic house of mirrors, like in the old carnivals, right? And you see all these different, not distortions, but actually aspects of yourself in all these different forms. Yet you're also doing this with somebody else. So, I can attest to it, and I'm excited to talk about it more. I wish I had more time tonight, but we'll reach out to you and put something together if you'd like to continue the conversation.
I would, and as soon as possible. So in a week
Yeah,
would be fine.
that's fine.
Appointment.
Yeah, we could
Yeah,
do that.
because
Keep it fresh.
people tend to forget.
Yeah,
We can just carry on the same
right on.
subject. You reminded me then of one of those Indian goddesses with many arms,
I saw
and I
her
said,
like that one night. Okay, I kid you not. She was blue. She had about 8
yeah,
arms, and I remember another night. We weren't necessarily having intercourse, but she was on like on top of me, and I saw very clearly what I could only describe as like an Egyptian priestess with more of a canine feature, in the face. I mean, it's mind blowing the level of, you could call it memory or coding, that this type of experience offers. But it's also what I find, because like I remember we had this episode of like 4 times happened within like a week and a half, and after the first one, I'm like, we're both like, let's try again. Like, now, let's go. But it wouldn't work. So what I was saying is that the great thing about this type of experience, which is really I guess like a enhancement of your own individual experience, there's no BS. You can't fake anything. Everything it's all predicated on how open you are, how much love is allowed, right? So it's quite amazing. And I look forward to it. We'll reach out to you. We'll do it quick, and we'll pick up on this, because now that I know you're excited to talk about it, I should have asked you this at the top of the hour. But Morgan says, damn, I need to get back to Arkansas. That's what I was thinking a minute ago when he was talking about that whole thing.
well, in parting note, I'll say you're very lucky to have such a wonderful partner and have
Yeah,
such a deep connection. And give my love to Morgan.
we'll do it. I will do it. You take care. Peace out. Love you.